On the private runway at London Biggin Hill Airport, billionaire Victoria Ashford looked with disdain at the grease-covered mechanic. She was furious. Her Gulfstream was broken, and in 48 hours she had to marry a man she despised. In a moment of cruel sarcasm, she threw out the challenge that would change everything. "If you fix my jet in 24 hours, I'll marry you." Charlie Bennett lifted his gaze from the sabotaged turbine and accepted with unsettling calm. Victoria didn't know she was fleeing a marriage that would destroy her, nor that this mechanic harbored a secret. And when 21 hours later the engine roared perfectly again, she understood she had underestimated the man who would turn her life upside down. The midday sun transformed the tarmac of the private hangar into a furnace. Victoria Ashford, 29 years of sharp beauty and inherited arrogance, paced nervously in her 3,000-pound heels. The white Burberry suit remained incredibly immaculate despite the heat, but her composure was crumbling under the weight of rage. The Gulfstream G6 Feffeds, a 60 million-pound jewel, lay motionless like a beached whale, and with it, her only escape route from the arranged marriage awaiting her in Edinburgh in 48 hours. Lord Alexander Pemberton, the man her father had chosen for her, was expecting her to seal not a love match, but a 20 billion-pound corporate merger. Victoria knew Pemberton's reputation only through her father's sanitized reports. A successful businessman, heir to a banking dynasty, widower for several years. The rumors about his tumultuous previous marriages had been dismissed as envious gossip. But something about the way the previous wives had vanished from public view troubled her deeply. The private hangar at Biggin Hill was her personal kingdom, the only place where she could be herself without the masks required by her role. Here, amongst the smell of aviation fuel and metal, she had learned to fly, escaping if only for a few hours from the gilded cage of her existence. It was at this moment of despair disguised as fury that Victoria noticed the mechanic emerging from beneath the fuselage. Charlie Bennett was 35 years sculpted by honest work. The oil-stained overalls couldn't hide a physique forged by years of effort, nor the quiet confidence of someone who knows what he's doing. There was something different about him compared to the other mechanics in the hangar. The way he moved around the jet betrayed a familiarity that went beyond mere professional competence. His hands touched the metal with the same reverence a musician caresses their instrument. The man studied the engine with expert eyes before pronouncing the diagnosis: sabotage. Someone had deliberately damaged the left turbine's cooling system. Not a chance failure, but an intentional act. The precision of the sabotage suggested sophisticated technical knowledge, not ordinary vandalism, but a targeted operation. Victoria scrutinized him with a mixture of interest and irritation. Who was this mechanic who dared speak to her with such confidence? The London accent, mixed with inflections that betrayed an education above average. When he introduced himself as the best aeronautical mechanic in London, despite working in this forgotten workshop, something about his calm annoyed her, or perhaps intrigued her. The conversation that followed was brief and charged with tension. Charlie estimated 24 hours for the repair, perhaps less with the right parts. His professional assessment included technical details that Victoria, despite her degree from Oxford, struggled to follow completely. But she understood enough to recognize genuine competence. It was then that Victoria had the maddest and most sarcastic idea of her life. Perhaps it was the pressure of the imminent marriage. Perhaps the frustration of a life controlled in every detail. Or perhaps simply the desire to defy fate. She stepped so close, she could smell the aroma of metal and honest work emanating from the man, and threw out her cruel challenge. "If you fix my jet in 24 hours, I'll marry you." The words came loaded with sarcasm, accompanied by a smile that had frozen the blood of CEOs far more powerful than a simple mechanic. It was the sort of cruel joke that London high society adored, humiliating subordinates with impossible promises. The silence that followed was absolute. The terrified assistant nearly choked on his tea. The other mechanics in the hangar stopped working, incredulous witnesses to the surreal scene. Even the sound of distant air traffic seemed to have stopped. Charlie's reaction was unexpected. Instead of laughing nervously or protesting, offended, he calmly set down the spanner, methodically wiped his hands on an already dirty rag, and looked at her. His brown eyes, which Victoria noticed were strangely expressive, studied her with an intensity that unsettled her. "I accept the challenge," he said with a firm voice. The tranquility of the response destabilized Victoria more than any other reaction. She had expected embarrassment, perhaps anger, surely rejection. Not this calm acceptance that seemed to take her more seriously than she herself did. When she laughed sarcastically, reminding him of the social gulf that separated them, she was worth more than he could earn in 10 lifetimes, Charlie demonstrated he knew exactly who she was. Not just the billionaire heiress, but Victoria Ashford, Oxford and Harvard graduate, CEO of the European division. But above all, a woman fleeing from something or someone. His perception hit her like a slap. How could a simple mechanic read so clearly through her facade? His refined manners contrasted with the dirty overalls, suggesting a more complex history than the apparent one. Charlie's intuition about the malicious nature of the breakdown and Victoria's haste to leave put her on the defensive. But it was when he suggested that her proposal wasn't entirely a joke that something moved in the woman's chest. Beneath layers of cynicism and privilege, a spark of something forgotten came to life. The pact was sealed with simple words: 24 hours. If he succeeded, she would keep her word. If he failed, he would disappear forever. The bet was absurd, and yet both treated it with deadly seriousness. Charlie nodded and set to work without adding anything more, leaving Victoria strangely disturbed as she walked away. Her steps echoed in the hangar as she reached the glass office from which she usually observed operations. But this time, instead of locking herself inside, she stopped at the threshold, turning to look back. She couldn't know that Charlie had already begun dismantling the turbine with a precision that betrayed much more than simple competence. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who had taken apart and reassembled this particular model dozens of times. She couldn't imagine that this man knew Gulf Streams better than he let on, that his presence in this modest workshop was a choice, not a necessity. And above all, she didn't suspect that fate had just begun weaving its web around them, that the sabotage wasn't the work of her father or the Pembertons, but of someone who wanted to protect her in the most dangerous way possible, that the next 24 hours would change not just her immediate future, but the entire trajectory of her life. Victoria Ashford, accustomed to controlling every variable, had just rolled the dice in a game whose rules she didn't know. And Charlie Bennett, the mechanic with the calm air and grease-stained hands, had accepted to play. The invisible stopwatch had begun. 24 hours to fix a jet. 24 hours to change two destinies. 24 hours to prove that sometimes the maddest challenges are the ones worth accepting. The first hours passed in a silence broken only by the hypnotic rhythm of tools on metal. Victoria, against all logic and convention, remained in the hangar. She had abandoned the suit jacket, rolled up the sleeves of her silk blouse, and sat on a metal crate to observe. Charlie worked with an absolute concentration that bordered on art. His seemingly rough hands moved with the grace of a surgeon, dismantling complex components as if he were performing a silent symphony. He hadn't asked for help or shown hesitation. Each gesture revealed years of experience and a deep understanding of the machine. It was Victoria who broke the silence, curious about where he had acquired such skills. The answer surprised her. 10 years in the RAF, repairing fighter jets under enemy fire in Afghanistan. A civilian Gulf Stream was child's play in comparison. The conversation that followed revealed unexpected layers. Charlie had left the forces disgusted at seeing young lives wasted for others' interests. The parallel with Victoria's situation was obvious and painful. When he mentioned Lord Alexander Pemberton and her father's gambling debts, Victoria's blood ran cold. The next revelation was devastating. Pemberton's first wife had been Charlie's sister. The suicide, 3 years earlier, after years of violence that had reduced her to a shadow. Victoria felt the world crumbling. Her father had lied to her, minimizing the gossip about Pemberton's brutality. The hours slipped by in a strange and intense way. Victoria found herself assisting Charlie, passing him tools, holding components, dirtying these hands accustomed only to signing million-pound contracts. They talked, as she had never talked with anyone. Charlie spoke about Emma with a controlled voice, but laden with pain. The brilliant and vivacious sister transformed into a victim. The failed attempts to save her. The shame that had trapped her. The terrible day when he found her in the bath. Victoria shared the void left by her mother's death when she was 10. Her father's transformation into a man obsessed with money and power. Her redoubled efforts to earn a place in the company, only to discover she remained a commodity for exchange. At 3 in the morning, whilst sharing terrible coffee from a vending machine, Victoria realized she had never felt so seen, so understood. Charlie had grease under his nails and sweat on his brow, but his eyes were present, attentive, alive in a way none of her peers had ever shown. When he confirmed he would succeed with hours to spare, Victoria wondered about afterwards. Charlie's answer threw her off balance. He didn't really expect her to marry him. He just wanted to give her an excuse to escape Pemberton. She could say she was already engaged. There were witnesses. The laughter that escaped Victoria was genuine, liberating. For the first time in years, she truly laughed. The absurdity of the situation, the madness of the plan, the strangeness of finding an ally in a grease-stained workshop, everything converged in a moment of pure, unexpected joy. Dawn found her asleep on the metal crate, exhausted. She woke with Charlie's work jacket over her shoulders and the sun filtering through the windows. He was still bent over the engine, but his face showed the satisfaction of work accomplished. The jet was fixed.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
With 3 hours to spare, the roar of the reignited engines filled the hangar with a sound that meant freedom to Victoria. Charlie had done the impossible, not only repaired the sabotage, but optimized the aircraft's performance. His competence went far beyond that of a simple mechanic. When Victoria asked how he had done it, the answer revealed another facet of the man. His mentor had been the best British aeronautical engineer, remaining unknown because he was just a provincial mechanic. The humility, mixed with pride in Charlie's voice, spoke of values different from those in Victoria's world. The moment of truth had arrived. Charlie had won the bet, but, as he packed away his tools, showed no intention of claiming the prize. His explanation touched Victoria deeply. He wasn't the type of man who forces a woman to marry over a bet. He just wanted to offer her an escape route. Now she had it. It was at that moment that something broke definitively in Victoria. The armor of cynicism built over years of disappointments gave way. She found herself confessing that she didn't want an escape route, but something else, something she couldn't even define. The air in the hangar charged with electricity as Charlie approached. The conversation that followed was intimate, loaded with naked truths. Victoria confessed the terror at the thought of flying to Pemberton, the unexpected connection born in those 24 hours. Charlie warned her. He wasn't a Prince Charming, but a mechanic who lived modestly, without yachts or villas. Victoria's response, that perhaps she needed precisely someone capable of fixing broken things, led to the inevitable moment. The kiss they exchanged as the sun flooded the hangar was desperate, hungry, full of promises and fears, a seal on something mad and real. The practical consequences were clear. Her father would destroy her. Pemberton wouldn't give up. She would lose everything: company, money, social position, Yet Victoria had never smiled with such freedom. For the first time in her life, the prospect of losing everything material didn't terrify her. The ringing phone, her father, was ignored and switched off, a symbolic gesture that marked a point of no return. When Victoria asked jokingly if the proposal still stood, both knew the joke had become destiny. The news exploded in the media like a bomb. The Ashford heiress rejecting the multi-million-pound marriage to wed an unknown mechanic. The newspapers went wild, social media collapsed. The world of London high society trembled at the scandal. William Ashford arrived at the hangar in less than 2 hours, escorted by bodyguards and with his face distorted by rage. The confrontation that followed was brutal in its rawness. Threats to disinherit Victoria, attempts to bribe Charlie, even physical violence grazed. Charlie maintained impressive calm in the face of threats and insults. His response to the bribery attempt, that neither he nor Victoria were for sale, hit home. When William raised his hand to strike him, Victoria interposed herself, returning the family ring in a gesture loaded with meaning. The final exchange between father and daughter was painful. The accusation that her mother would be disappointed was countered by Victoria. Her mother had married for love, before money corrupted William. The blow landed, leaving the man momentarily vulnerable before rage took control again. The ultimatum, 24 hours to disappear, was received with a strange mixture of fear and liberation. As William left, Victoria trembled not with terror but with pure adrenaline. For the first time, she had chosen her own destiny. The wedding took place in a small church in Whitechapel. She in the grease-stained suit, he in work overalls, Victoria's assistant, and 2 mechanics as witnesses. The vicar, initially perplexed, celebrated what he defined as the strangest and most authentic union he had blessed. The motorcycle escape that followed was a revelation for Victoria. Accustomed to private jets and limousines, she discovered the wild freedom of wind in her hair, of back roads, of the anonymity of small hotels. The world seen from the saddle of a Triumph had colors and flavors never experienced. The stop in the Cotswolds brought predictable but equally painful news. The solicitor confirmed that William had acted quickly. Accounts frozen, credit cards blocked, properties sealed. Victoria was officially a pariah, erased from the Ashford Empire. That night, in a modest inn overlooking the hills, Victoria and Charlie consummated their marriage. It was a union different from any previous experience of Victoria's, without power games or need to impress, just 2 souls who had recognized each other at the most improbable moment. In the darkness, embraced, they faced reality. Tomorrow would be difficult. Pemberton wouldn't accept rejection. William wouldn't forgive. Yet Victoria confessed to fearing the return to the past more than the uncertain future. A new, liberating fear. The following weeks tested their union in ways they hadn't even foreseen. Lord Alexander Pemberton orchestrated a fierce revenge campaign. Defamatory articles, pressure to dismiss Charlie, intimidation through his thugs. But he had underestimated both of them. Life in the 2-bedroom flat above the workshop was a culture shock for Victoria. 2 cramped rooms, a tiny bathroom, a kitchen that was little more than a corner. Yet, in that reduced space, Victoria discovered a freedom never known in her luxurious penthouses. Learning as a mechanic's assistant revealed unexpected talent in Victoria. Hands accustomed to signing million-pound contracts learned to tighten bolts and diagnose problems. Charlie was a patient teacher, and she a determined student proving herself worthy of her new life. The evenings were simple, fish and chips, the only meal Victoria managed not to burn, conversations about the future, modest but concrete projects. It was during one of these frugal dinners that the solicitor rang with shocking news. William Ashford was ruined. The Pembertons had called in the debts, and the empire was crumbling. For the first time, Victoria saw her father as a victim of the system he had helped perpetuate. Despite everything, the blood bond hurt. The meeting with the mysterious investor interested in saving Ashford Enterprises revealed the biggest surprise. Margaret Bennett, Charlie's mother and silent heiress to an aeronautical engineering empire her late husband had built with his revolutionary patents. The truth about Charlie's past emerged. The proud rejection of the family inheritance, the choice to make his own way as a simple mechanic, the stubbornness that had led him to hide his privileged origins. Margaret, shrewd businesswoman as much as loving mother, had followed Victoria's career for years. Margaret's offer was pragmatic and generous. Buy Ashford Industries, merge it with Bennett Engineering, appoint Victoria CEO of the new entity. William would retain a dignified position. It was salvation and opportunity together. Margaret's motivation moved Victoria. It wasn't just business, it was recognition of the courage of a woman who had chosen love over convenience. It was trust in talent wasted in power games. It was also the very human desire to see grandchildren. The joke about grandchildren and fish and chips lightened the moment, but the substance remained. Victoria had found not just a husband, but a family that believed in her not for her surname, but for her worth. A year later, the ribbon cutting at BAV Aerospace marked much more than a company opening. It was the visible triumph of brave choices, of love that overcomes conventions, of second chances seized in flight. Victoria Bennett Ashford, CEO in her own right, radiated a confidence that no longer derived from inherited privilege, but from earned competence. At her side, Charlie wore the suit with the same naturalness as the overalls. He had accepted to lead research and development, but only whilst maintaining the privilege of getting his hands dirty. William Ashford's presence at the event marked a circle closing. The man had aged, softened by forced humility. Forgiveness between father and daughter had been difficult, partial, but real. Burnt bridges aren't easily rebuilt, but at least now there were foundations. The news of Lord Alexander Pemberton's arrest had brought late but necessary justice. The investigations triggered by Victoria's rejection had uncovered years of crimes. Emma, Charlie's sister, had finally received posthumous justice. Victoria's speech at the opening touched hearts with its disarming honesty. She spoke of the jet repaired in 24 hours, but above all of how it wasn't the aircraft that was broken, but herself. The mechanic had repaired much more than a turbine. The words about love born in improbable places, about rewarded courage, about losing everything as a way to find oneself resonated authentically. The thunderous applause confirmed that her story had touched universal chords. That afternoon, in the two-bedroom flat above the workshop they had decided to keep, dinner was still fish and chips. Now Victoria made them almost decently. The playful dialogue about regrets revealed the solidity achieved. The private jet was comfortable, certainly, but Charlie had repaired something infinitely more precious. The kiss they exchanged as London glowed outside the window sealed not a fairy tale, but a true story. In a hangar on the other side of the city, the Gulfstream G650 rested in perfect efficiency, mechanical witness to how a sarcastic bet can transform into the most authentic of destinies. The moral, if there was one, was simple. True love isn't born in fairy tale castles, but often in dusty workshops, where grease-stained hands know how to touch broken wings and wounded hearts with delicacy. Victoria and Charlie didn't necessarily live happily ever after by fairy tale standards, but they lived authentically, together, facing each day as it comes. And perhaps, in the end, that's the only way of living that really matters. With courage, with love, with the ability to see beyond appearances, with someone by your side capable of repairing not just broken engines, but also wounded souls. Their story continues, one day at a time, one challenge at a time, just as it had begun, with an impossible bet that turned out to be exactly what both needed. If this story made your heart race and believe that true love can be born anywhere, leave a like, share in the comments. Do you believe love can overcome social differences? Have you ever made a mad choice for love? Subscribe and ring the bell to not miss more stories that prove true love doesn't look at the bank account. Remember, sometimes the right person arrives at the most improbable moment, in the most unexpected way. Don't close your heart to possibilities.